There were 13 steps down to the cellar. Mrs. Albright had counted them every Tuesday for 40 years, the day she did the laundry. But that Tuesday, in the brittle silence of her old farmhouse, she heard a 14th. The sound was soft, a wet compression of dirt where stone should have been. It came from under the house. It was followed by a whisper, not in her ear, but in the marrow of her bones, a single word swallowed by the dark: found. For the residents of Barrow's End, a forgotten hamlet clinging to the Yorkshire moors, the winter of 1947 wasn't just a season, it was a tomb. The snow began on Boxing Day and did not stop. It fell in great, suffocating sheets, until the world was reduced to the white beyond your window and the creeping cold within. Roads became myths. Radio signals frayed into static. The village was cut off, a ship stranded in a frozen sea. And then, on the 17th of January, the children went missing. Not all of them. Just the 8 pupils of Miss Alara Vance's small classroom, the single schoolhouse that served Barrow's End and the outlying farms. They had left for home at the usual time of 3:30, bundled against the flurries. None of them arrived. The search party assembled at first light, a grim line of fathers and uncles against the endless white. They found the children's trail easily enough, a scuff of small boots leading away from the lane, not towards home, but up towards the high moor and the place known as Grimm's Beacon. They followed the tracks until the wind and fresh snow scoured them away, just below the beacon's crest. Beyond that point, there was nothing. No scar in the snow, no shred of wool on the thorny gorse. It was as if the moor had opened its mouth and swallowed them whole. For 3 days, the search continued, growing more desperate, more hopeless. The cold was a living thing, biting through layers of wool and oilskin. On the 4th morning, as the searchers gathered in the pub, hollow-eyed and defeated, a sound cut through the mournful wind. It was a whistle. Clear, piercing, and achingly familiar, the specific 5-note tune Miss Vance used to call her class to order. It came from the north, from the direction of the village itself. The men stumbled back into Barrow's End, following the sound. It led them not to a child, but to the old stone well in the village green, long since capped with an iron lid. The whistle seemed to emanate from the black hole beneath it, echoing up the cold, damp stones. With frozen, fumbling hands, they pried the lid off. Tom Beckett, the blacksmith, lowered a lantern on a rope. Its yellow light swayed, illuminating the dark water 20 feet below. There was nothing there. Just the reflection of the lantern, and perhaps, for a flickering second, the reflection of a pale, small face looking up from beneath the water's surface. Tom blinked, and it was gone. But the whistling had stopped. The village descended into a silent panic. Grief curdled into something stranger, sharper. Whispers began, furtive and ashamed. They started with old Mrs. Albright, who claimed she'd seen the children the afternoon they vanished. She'd been watching from her parlor window, she said, and she saw them following a will-o'-the-wisp, a shimmering light that danced ahead of them, leading them off the path. No one put much stock in it. Mrs. Albright's mind was known to wander these days. Then, the findings at the schoolhouse. Miss Vance, a woman of stern propriety and a backbone of steel, had been inconsolable. The constable from Ashford, a weary man named Price who had made the grueling trek on foot, went to her cottage to take a statement. He found her meticulously cleaning the schoolroom, scrubbing the floorboards with lye soap. The room smelled fiercely chemical, but underneath it, Price, who had served in the trenches, caught another scent. Coppery and damp. The smell of a freshly turned field, or old blood. His eyes fell on the coal scuttle by the stove. Not for coal. It was filled to the brim with small, personal effects, a hair ribbon, a pencil case, a wooden top, a well-thumbed copy of Treasure Island. The belongings of her missing pupils. When asked, Miss Vance said she was putting things in order. Her eyes were dry and very bright. Price began to dig, not into the frozen earth, but into the past. Barrow's End was a closed book, its pages gummed together by secrecy and old sorrow. He learned the schoolhouse was not the original. The first one, a timber and daub building, had burned to the ground on a January night in 1897. The headmaster, a man named Alastair Firth, and 3 pupils had died in the blaze. The tragedy had been ruled an accident, a faulty stove. The school was rebuilt a year later on the same foundation. A trip to the county archives, once the roads were passable, revealed a terser, darker report buried beneath the official one. A coroner's note, later suppressed. It indicated the bones of the children recovered from the 1897 fire showed pre-mortem injuries inconsistent with a conflagration. The report vanished, and with it, any questions. Back in Barrow's End, the strange occurrences solidified into a pattern, a dreadful rhythm. The whistling would come at dusk, always the same 5 notes, seeming to drift from a different location each night: the church belfry, the abandoned smithy behind Beckett's forge, the war memorial. Villagers began locking their doors not just against the cold, but against the sound. Then, the banging started. It was young Liam Byrne, holed up in his family's farmhouse on the edge of the moor, who heard it first. A frantic, pounding rhythm on the heavy oak door, so hard it shook the iron latch. His heart leapt, a survivor. He wrenched the door open, a cry of relief on his lips. The wind and snow shrieked in. On the doorstep stood 2 figures, barely visible in the blizzard's swirl. They were small, the size of children, but hunched and wrong. Their clothes were not winter coats, but tattered, dark rags that streamed in the gale. They didn't speak, didn't move to come in. They just stood there, and as a gust momentarily cleared the snow, Liam saw their faces. Not the faces of the missing children. These faces were elongated, skeletal, with deep, shadowed sockets where eyes should be. Their skin was the color of old clay, cracked and seeping a dark, viscous fluid that froze instantly on their cheeks. Liam slammed the door, his blood turned to ice. He threw the bolt and backed away, but not before he heard it, a dry, rustling whisper from the other side of the wood, in a chorus of young, dead voices: "He keeps us in the walls." The next morning, Liam was found by his father, catatonic with shock, finger pointing rigidly at the outside of the front door. Etched into the ancient, frost-rimed oak, as if by impossibly strong, cold fingers, was a single word: found. Price, now deeply alarmed, confronted Miss Vance. He showed her the archived note about the 1897 injuries. For the first time, her steely composure cracked. Not into tears, but into a cold, defiant rage. "You think you know this place?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You think tragedy is a singular event? It's a legacy, Constable. A inheritance. That schoolhouse isn't built on a foundation of stone. It's built on a foundation of silence." She revealed a story passed down in hushed tones by the village women. Alastair Firth, the 1897 headmaster, was not a victim. He was a monster. A man of cruel, unnatural appetites, who had preyed upon his pupils. The fire that killed him and 3 boys was no accident. It was set by the village fathers, a brutal, final justice. They buried the secret with the bones, rebuilt the school atop it, and swore an oath to never speak of it again. The children's names were scrubbed from the memorial, their families paid off or driven away. "The land remembers," Miss Vance whispered, her eyes distant. "It remembers blood, oath and betrayal. And sometimes, when the balance is upset, it gives back what was taken." The current children, Price pressed. What do they have to do with an old crime? Miss Vance's gaze snapped back to him, clear and terrifying. "A debt is owed. A silence must be filled. The old pact was broken. The walls are hungry again." Price left her cottage, his mind reeling. He was a practical man, but the pieces fit a supernatural jigsaw he couldn't ignore. The whistling was the call Firth had used. The banging was the sound of small fists on a door that wouldn't open in 1897. The things on Liam's doorstep were not the missing children of 1947, but the restless, corrupted spirits of the original victims, their forms twisted by decades of anger and confinement. But who had broken the pact? What had upset the balance? His answer came from an unexpected source: Tom Beckett, the blacksmith. Guilt-ridden and drinking heavily, Tom confessed to Price in the empty pub. The previous autumn, during repairs to the schoolhouse foundation after a bad flood, he'd been the one working in the crawl space. He'd found something there, hidden in the crumbling mortar between the old stones, a small, tin box. Inside were a man's gold pocket watch, annealed AF, a few shillings, and, most chillingly, a collection of milk teeth, each wrapped in a slip of paper with a boy's name and date. Horrified, but fearing the scandal and the upheaval it would cause, Tom had done what he thought was best. He didn't rebury the box. He took it to the one person in the village who represented authority and order, Miss Alara Vance. "I gave it to her," Tom slurred, his head in his hands. "I thought she'd know what to do. She just took it. She thanked me. She said she would lay them to rest properly. But she had a look in her eye. Not sadness. Not shock. It was like recognition." Price understood. Tom hadn't just found relics. He'd found evidence, the physical proof of Firth's crimes. And by bringing it to the surface, he had violated the old, brutal pact of silence. He had reminded the land, and whatever slept within it, of the debt unpaid. Miss Vance hadn't tried to lay the spirits to rest. Price now feared she had done the opposite. Was she, in some twisted way, a successor? A keeper of the dark legacy? Was her cleaning, her collection of the children's things, not an act of grief, but one of preparation? The storm reached its peak on the night of the new moon. The wind screamed like a thing in pain, and the whistling came not from one location, but from all around, a dissonant chorus emanating from the very walls of the houses. Then, the banging started. Not on one door, but on every door and window in Barrow's End, a cacophony of desperate, angry pounding. Price, armed with a torch and a revolver he prayed was useless, made his way to the schoolhouse. He found the door unlocked. Inside, a single oil lamp burned on Miss Vance's desk. The room was spotless, chillingly orderly. The coal scuttle of belongings was gone. Miss Vance stood before the blackboard. She wasn't writing. She was listening. A slow, grinding, scraping sound was coming from inside the walls, from the lath and plaster behind the blackboard. "They're here, Constable," she said without turning. "The old ones and the new. The debt must be paid. The walls must be filled. It's the only way the whispering stops." "What did you do, Alara?" Price asked, his voice tight. She finally turned. Her face was serene, almost beatific. What was always meant to be done? Balance. Firth took 3. The pact required 3. But the pact is broken. The hole is bigger now. It requires more. Her eyes glinted in the lamplight. 8 for 8. A full class. A permanent silence. She gestured to the wall. The scraping grew louder. Price saw the plaster near the floorboard begin to bulge inward, as if something was pressing against it from the other side. Small, hand-shaped impressions appeared in the white surface, followed by hairline cracks. She had lured the children. She had used the whistle, their trusted signal, to draw them away. But she hadn't killed them. She had offered them. To the thing in the walls, to the angry ghosts of 1897, as a replacement, a new batch of souls to quell their rage and restore the terrible, silent balance. "Where are they?" Price roared, leveling his gun, though it shook in his hand. "Listening," she whispered. And then the wall gave way. Not in a crash, but in a sigh of collapsing dust and splintered lath. The opening was dark, a gaping maw in the schoolroom. A smell rolled out, of damp earth, of rot, of that coppery, ancient scent. And from the darkness, things began to emerge. First came the figures from Liam's doorstep, the clay-skinned, eyeless shapes of the 1897 victims, moving with a jerky, unnatural grace. Behind them, shuffling slowly, came the 8 missing children of Barrow's End. Their faces were blank, their eyes wide and unseeing, their clothes clean but damp. They moved like sleepwalkers, in a silent, obedient line. Miss Vance smiled. "You see? They're together now. The lesson is complete." Price acted on pure instinct. He didn't fire at the emerging horrors. He fired at the oil lamp on the desk. The glass shattered. Kerosene sprayed across the dry wooden surface and the floorboards, the same floorboards Miss Vance had scrubbed raw. Fire, hungry and orange, leapt up immediately, following the trails of flammable soap and oil. It raced across the floor, caught the curtains, and began to climb the walls. Miss Vance's serenity vanished, replaced by primal terror. Not of the fire, but of the disruption. "No. You fool. You'll break it. You'll let them all out." The things from the wall shrieked, a sound of pure, desolate fury. The firelight flickered over their cracked faces. The missing children stumbled, their trance broken by the heat and light. They began to cry, to call for their mothers. The fire, the very element that had once been used to hide the crime, now became Price's chaotic salvation. In the confusion of flame and smoke and screaming, he lunged forward, grabbing the two closest children and shoving them towards the door. "Run," he bellowed. "To the green. Now." The other children, awakened from their stupor, followed in a panicked herd. The ancient spirits writhed in the growing inferno, their forms seeming to blur and unravel in the heat. Miss Vance stood amidst it all, not fleeing, but screaming at the crumbling wall, at the dispersing shadows, as the flames took hold of her skirts. Price shepherded the last child out the door as the roof timbers groaned. He turned for a final look. Through the blaze, he saw Miss Vance, engulfed, and behind her, in the gaping hole in the wall, not a crawl space, but an impossible, deep darkness. And from that darkness, for a fleeting second, he saw a single, pale, sorrowful face, a boy from 1897, before the ceiling collapsed, sealing the opening with fire and timber. The schoolhouse burned to the ground that night, just as it had 50 years before. The 8 children of Barrow's End were recovered, physically unharmed but forever shadowed. They had little memory of their days missing, only a recurring dream of a dark, warm place, of the sound of whispering stones, and of a kind, smiling woman who told them to be quiet, to wait, that they were part of an important lesson. Constable Price filed his report. He wrote of a tragic accident, of a disturbed teacher, of a fortunate rescue amid a terrible fire. He made no mention of tin boxes, clay-faced specters, or debts to the land. The official story became the truth, as it often does. Barrow's End rebuilt, but not the school. The land was left fallow, a scorched patch at the village's heart. The whistling never came again. The banging stopped. But sometimes, on the stillest, coldest winter nights, when the moon is new and the wind drops to nothing, the villagers lock their doors a little tighter. They bank their fires a little higher. And if they listen very closely, they swear they can hear it, not a whistle, not a bang, but a soft, rhythmic, grinding sound. Like small hands, patiently scraping mortar from between old, cold stones.